Manchester United have been going through it of late, but today that comes to an end as I take over the club for the next 10 seasons. They were an absolute juggernaut during my childhood, so let's get them back to that. I will be using an updated database in FM24 to have this season's squads and teams in the Premier League, so let's get to work. Now, looking at the table in real life, this isn't good reading for 𝘼𝙗𝙤𝙪 𝙈𝙚 and United fans. But luckily, I gave myself this entire season to see what I could do with this team. And in this universe, unlike in real life, United won the Community Shield via penalties thanks to 𝘼𝙗𝙤𝙪 𝘼𝙗𝙤𝙪 seeing his penalty caught by 𝘼𝙗𝙤𝙪. So that was trophy number 1 in this 10 seasons save, but unfortunately for me, things didn't exactly go to plan in the domestic cup competitions after the Community Shield, which I know it's game number 1. Unlike real life, I was drawn against Liverpool in the 3rd round of the Carabao Cup, and we suffered a 3-0 loss at Anfield with Luis Diaz bagging a brace. And it would be Liverpool who would send us home in the FA Cup as well later in the season. We lost at Anfield for a second time this season thanks to an Alexis McAllister goal in extra time. So we're showing signs of improvement. Things were much better in the Premier League despite losing 2 of our opening 3 games to West Ham and Tottenham respectively. We got things back on track, but it was obvious that the main issue we have is in the final third of the pitch. Rasmus Højlund was the club's top goal scorer this year, but he only managed 18 goals in 47 appearances in all competitions. Our best player for the season was youngster 𝘼𝙗𝙤𝙪 𝙈𝙚, who had the highest average rating throughout our entire squad, and he will be a player that I will be looking to keep hold of and develop for the entire 10 seasons. In January, we did have some bigger outgoings as Johnny Evans was sold to Girona for 825k, Victor Lindelof was sold to Spurs for 4.5 million, and the big one saw Casemiro join Saudi side Al Ahly for a whopping £50 million. Our second half of the season was definitely a little bit more hit and miss than the start, but we still managed to achieve a 3rd place finish in the Premier League and have secured a Champions League spot for next season. But you can tell we're in an FM universe here as Spurs are title winners, I guess showing what they could have done this year without all the injuries. Shout out Big Ange. In real life, United have looked decent in the Europa League, and we were following suit, winning our group and coasting into the knockout stages. We managed to take out German side Stuttgart 4-2 on aggregate before defeating Spanish side Bilbao 9-5 in the quarter-finals, which proved to be a bit of a goal fest. It was English opposition in the semis as we had to take on eventual Premier League winners Spurs. We were on the road for the first leg and the lads came back from a goal down to win it 2-1. The game at Old Trafford was tight, but we scored the only goal of the game through Antony. So that set up a Europa League final against Italian side Roma. Is this potentially a sign of things to come for United in real life maybe? Goals were flying in for both sides and after 90 minutes the game was 3-3 and we were forced into extra time. But this is where our squad depth took over and goals from Amad and Ugarte saw us crowned Europa League champions. So all in all, a solid first season for us at Old Trafford, but this is where we start to go to work. Ineos have given me a transfer budget of £100 million to make some moves, which is largely bolstered by that January sell of Casemiro. This summer saw 2 notable outgoings as Jadon Sancho completed his move to Chelsea for £25 million, and he was also joined at Stamford Bridge by Diogo Dalot, who joined the Blues for £42.5 million. First up on the incomings was a free transfer signing of German defender Jonathan Tah from Bayer Leverkusen, and I followed that up by spending a whopping £257 million and boy do I love installments. Also from Bayer Leverkusen we added Pierre Hincapié for an initial £50 million. We also spent a huge £80 million to secure the services of wonderkid Endrick from Real Madrid, but here's a player that I think will be at the club this entire save. To fill the Casemiro-sized hole in our defensive midfield, we spent all of Chelsea's cash back with Chelsea to sign Moises Caicedo for an initial £75 million. And considering I don't personally like Andre Onana, I replaced him with Porto goalkeeper Diogo Costa, who only cost us £27.5 million. So this is how the team looks going into Season 2, and despite only being 19 years old, Endrick is going to be playing as many minutes as humanly possible for us up front this year. But we are back in the Champions League and we'll be taking on Barcelona in the UEFA Super Cup, representing the Europa League. So we opened the season with the UEFA Super Cup, where we took on last season's Champions League winners Barcelona, and to be honest, it was a good test, but it is kind of a glorified friendly at the end of the day. But a goal in each half from us, from Rasmus Højlund and Marcus Rashford, saw us lift the first and last trophy of the season. Believe me when I say it, season number 2 was a bit of a transitional one for us, but stick with this video. If you're a United fan, it does get a hell of a lot better. Liverpool continue to be our Achilles heel in domestic cup competitions in this save, as they sent us home empty-handed in the Carabao Cup semi-final. We got hammered at Anfield, but won the game at Old Trafford 3-0, however it was too little, too late, and we were out. This season we also made it one round further in the FA Cup before getting handily beaten by Arsenal at the Emirates. And our return to the Champions League was a largely positive one, but it did have a pretty sour ending. We won 6 of our 8 games in the new format to see us qualify automatically for the round of 16. We had to take on Newcastle in this one and got torn apart in the first leg at St James's Park, losing 3-0, giving ourselves a mountain to climb in the second leg. Goals were flowing for both sides in this one, but the game ended in a 3-3 draw, and we were out at the hands of English opposition, which isn't great. Especially as we started the Premier League season well, going unbeaten for our first 7 matches of the campaign. Season 2 was the year of 𝘼𝙗𝙤𝙪 𝙈𝙚, as the Argentine went off this year, securing 12 goals and 13 assists in all competitions, which is very impressive considering lots of these appearances were from the subs bench. In January, we only had one player sell, as 𝘼𝙗𝙤 𝙈𝙚 left the club to join Juventus, with us recouping 17.25 million. The second half of the season was littered with silly defeats against the likes of Everton and Leeds. Results like this saw us finish the year in 4th and secure Champions League football for another season. But ultimately, we were 21 points adrift of champions Manchester City. The board went to back me again, but some of last season's instalments came back to haunt me, as the club only had £70 million for me to spend this window. So we're going to have to make some money before we can spend some money. This window we cashed in on the injury-prone Luke Shaw, sending him to Newcastle for £46 million. And he was followed out the door by Jonathan Tah, who joined him at St James's Park for £43.5 million, which is not a bad flip for a player that I signed for free one summer ago. Replacing Shaw in the left-back spot was Victor Christensen, who signed from Leicester on an initial £46.5 million deal. So basically the same price as Shaw, but 8 years younger and a lot less injury prone, we hope. We also improved its centre-back as well, as we signed wonderkid Ousmane Dembele from Sporting for £39.5 million, along with Everton and England prospect Jarrad Branthwaite for £65 million. We did also sign young winger Ruben van Bommel from AZ Alkmaar for £17 million, but he's not ready for us just yet, so he will go back to the Netherlands on loan for the season. Those signings have our best starting 11 looking like this going into the year, which still has several United current players in there. This is the season that I want us to have a good run at the Premier League, but the media have us at 14-1 to get the job done. Before the summer window closed, we secured the services of 𝘼𝙗𝙤𝙪 from Brazil for just £13.75 million. But even with him in the squad, we really couldn't turn a corner in the domestic cup competitions. Bournemouth sent us home early in the Carabao Cup after beating us 2-0 at Old Trafford. And it was Manchester City who knocked us out of the FA Cup thanks to a goal from new striker Victor Gyökeres. And I personally think having him and Erling Haaland up front is a little bit unfair for the rest of the Premier League. And speaking of the Premier League, we had an amazing start to the year, only losing once between August and December, which happened to be at Old Trafford, losing to Liverpool. This was a coming-of-age season for Endrick, as the wonder kid scored 17 goals for us in all competitions, whilst providing the team with 9 assists, which earned him his first caps and first goal for Brazil. But instead of falling off a cliff in the second half of this season, we managed to hold on to things, only suffering 3 defeats after we moved into 2026. It wasn't the best points return, but thanks to a 5-0 win against Brentford on the final game of the season, we were crowned Premier League champions for the first time in 14 years. However, I didn't care. Manchester United were Premier League champions again. The final competition for me to report on this season was the Champions League, and we made it through the league phase with ease, finishing on 16 points and making it straight into the round of 16. We lost the first leg of that tie away to Porto, but recovered exceptionally well, winning the second leg 7-0 at Old Trafford. In the next round, we struggled again on the road, drawing 0-0 with Juventus before making it through thanks to a win at home. It was a Manchester derby in the semis as we had to face now City manager Carlo Ancelotti. This time we had the first leg at home and we shared a 1-1 draw with Haaland cancelling out Antony's opener. Then at the Etihad things fell apart as we lost the game 5-2 with Matthijs de Ligt getting a straight red card in the second half, which really didn't help things. But all in all, technically another positive season and we are now again the best team in England. Right? That's how it works. If you win the Prem, you're the best team in the country. However, we are not going to rest on our laurels as we've been given another £78 million to spend in the transfer market. This was the first year of note that we actually didn't sell anybody, we just had youth players leaving Manchester United at the ends of their deals. However, we did sign one of the hottest prospects in world football as we paid £105 million to Barcelona to sign Lamine Yamal. I supplemented the signing of Yamal with Turkish international Semih Kılıçsoy for £35 million and Dennis Seaman to be our backup goalkeeper for £10 million. We've got lots of young flair in the final third with Bruno pulling the strings in the hole. I think this is going to be a thing of beauty. This season we add the Community Shield back to the schedule as Premier League winners and we will take on Manchester City as last year's FA Cup winners. I will also be trying to prove that last season's title win wasn't a fluke, but City are still favourites to win the league title, with us back in third at 6-1 odds. The Community Shield was a tightly contested Manchester derby, but yet again we came out on top thanks to Diogo Costa saving young Rico Lewis's penalty. However, we were served a little bit of a humbling in the Carabao Cup, as this time penalties weren't our friends as Championship side Hull dumped us out. And sadly for us, the disappointment didn't stop there. We had a horrible start to the Premier League, losing to Crystal Palace, Arsenal, Newcastle and Bournemouth all before Christmas. In January, we said goodbye to Joshua Zirkzee, who joined Chelsea for £38 million, and Amad Diallo, who signed for Brentford for £12.25 million. I decided that we didn't need to strengthen in January as I backed the players in the squad, and how wrong I was from a league perspective. We only lost once in the second half of the season on the road to Brentford, but the damage was already done and we failed to win back-to-back Premier League titles. This season we finished 3 points behind eventual winners Liverpool. But as you can tell, in the second half of the season we really kind of did turn it up a notch, and you could tell in the cup competitions. We had a relatively easy pathway in the FA Cup, knocking out Charlton, West Brom, Blackburn, Chelsea and Sheffield Wednesday on our way to an epic final at Wembley. It was another Manchester derby in this cup final and we meant business this time and started really well, bagging 2 goals early through Lamine Yamal and Bruno from the spot. Phil Foden did add a goal for City before half-time, but rarely threatened in the second half, and we held on to win our first FA Cup at the Save. This season, we weren't as impressive in the Champions League, only managing a 10th place finish in that league phase, meaning we'd have to face a playoff round fixture. We had to play Napoli here, but the Italian side didn't put up much of a fight, as we won both games 3-0 to move on to the next round. It was Inter Milan up next in that round of 16, but yet again they failed to put up a lot of resistance, losing 6-1 on aggregate. Then of course we had to face Manchester City at the quarter-final stage. The first leg was at Old Trafford and the goals were flying in for both sides, but thanks to Lamine Yamal we headed into the second leg with a 3-goal lead after a 5-2 win. But that didn't matter at the Etihad as Marcus Rashford took the game by the scruff of the neck, scoring a brace in a 3-1 win on the night to see us marching on to the semi-finals. And in those semi-finals we had to return to Milan, this time taking on AC Milan. We were rubbish for the first leg at the San Siro, losing 2-1 on the night, but were handed a late lifeline thanks to Rasmus Højlund. But then the power of Old Trafford kicked in for us, as a goal in each half from Alejandro Garnacho was enough to see us make our first Champions League final of the Save so far. And who else would it be in the final other than Real Madrid? It was a tight first half, but on the hour mark Vinicius Jr. gave Madrid that lead. But not to be upstaged, 𝘼𝙗𝙤𝙪 showed nerves of steel to equalise from the spot just 12 minutes later. 90 minutes couldn't separate the two teams, so we went to extra time where a loose corner was squared to 𝘼𝙗𝙤𝙪, who tried his luck from outside of the area and was able to beat Thibaut Courtois. And that was enough to see us lift the Champions League trophy for the first time in this save. And United fans, you're going to have to tell me, would you concede the Premier League title to Liverpool if it meant United winning another Champions League trophy? So we had lots of money to spend over the summer, and being Champions League winners really added us with a little bit of extra clout. But to top things up, we still had a couple of big profile players leave the club in the summer. First, Marcus Rashford joined Al Ahly for £41 million, and he was followed to Saudi Arabia by Lisandro Martinez, who joined Al Hilal for £62 million. A little bit closer to home, we said goodbye to Mason Mount, who joined Barcelona for £33 million. That topped up my transfer budget by £136 million, which allowed me to go shopping. But first, I still wanted to wheel and deal, so we brought in 𝘼𝙗𝙤𝙪, Nicholas Sewald, 𝘼𝙗𝙤𝙪 𝙈𝙚 and 𝘼𝙗𝙤𝙪 all on free transfers. The recruitment of talented new gens has also begun this summer, as we signed 𝘼𝙗𝙤𝙪 Antipelli from AGF in Denmark for £6.75 million and Pontus Eckendal from Copenhagen for £17.25 million. But neither of them are ready for the first team, so once again they have rejoined their separate clubs in Scandinavia for the season on loan. And now we move into the big boy spending. First up, we dropped £220 million to prize Jamal Musiala away from Bayern Munich, before dropping another £210 million to bring Jude Bellingham to the club. I've said it before in this video, I'll say it again, I love installments in Football Manager. So this is how we're looking going into the season, which is a little bit top heavy, but we do have some serious firepower. We've got 6 competitions on the schedule this year, so it's gonna be a busy one. We opened the year with the Community Shield, where we took on Liverpool at Wembley. Endrick got us off to a great start in this match, but right at the death, Ryan Gravenberch pulled Liverpool level to send the game to penalties. But this is where Alisson reminded everyone of why he is one of the best keepers in the world, saving pens from 𝘼𝙗𝙤𝙪 and Musiala to see Liverpool win the first trophy of the season. We did recover quickly to win our first piece of silverware ourselves, hammering Europa League winners Newcastle in that UEFA Super Cup. Our start to the league season was frantic, with games all over the place and in all competitions, but for the most part you can see we are winning a majority of our matches now. And then in January, the unspeakable happened. We were taken over by an Indian tycoon, Rohit Fernandez. The first thing the new owners did was clear a majority of the club's outstanding debts, allowed me to improve all of our training facilities along with our youth recruitment and our junior coaching. Then they backed me in the transfer window, increasing my mid-season budget to £140 million. It was honestly like I was in dreamland. Do you know how rare a tycoon takeover is in Football Manager? Given the increased budget, I went out and landed Giorgio Scalvini for £78 million, just buying him outright. Perhaps this does mean that this is an end to my installments work. But to help balance the books a little, I sold an unhappy Josip Sutalo to PSG for £64 million. After the takeover, I was in dreamland and we continued to smash through a majority of competitions this season. We made it to the Carabao Cup at the end of February, where we took on Arsenal. In a tight game, Kai Havertz opened the scoring for the Gunners, but that was quickly cancelled out by Bellingham minutes later. But it was Havertz and Arsenal who had the last laugh, as he lashed home his second goal of the game to see Arsenal win the trophy. And to be honest, 1 out of 3 at this stage of the season isn't great, considering the amount of talent that we have in this team and the amount of money I've spent. But after that defeat, we really buttoned things up and waltzed on to claim our Premier League crown. We finished the season on 97 points, with Brighton in second place, but they were a massive 20 points behind us. The FA Cup final was up next for us, and it was a repeat of the previous season's final and another Manchester derby. We huffed and puffed in this one, but failed to make the breakthrough until academy youngster Hanif Joseph was fouled in the box. 𝘼𝙗𝙪 was the man under pressure and held his nerve, firing low and beyond Ederson to score the only goal of the game to see us lift back-to-back FA Cups. The Champions League was pretty routine for us this year, defeating Inter Milan, Chelsea and Atletico Madrid in the knockout phases to return to the final, where we would take on Barcelona. It was a tense game in Vienna with neither side playing their best football, but Semi took the game by the scruff of the neck, scoring twice to complete a man of the match performance to see us lift the Champions League trophy for a second season in a row. Our trophy haul was impressive this season, but it wasn't a clean sweep, and that will be the goal for next year, especially as the new board have backed me even further in this window, giving me a eye-watering £273 million to spend on the playing squad. This summer, we said goodbye to some firm, solid servants at the club. First, Bruno joined Real Madrid for £12.75 million before 𝘼𝙗𝙤𝙪 𝙈𝙚 signed for Arsenal for £43 million. I was then able to quickly flip another one of the free transfer signings from last season as 𝘼𝙗𝙤𝙪 𝙤𝙪 joined PSG. But since the takeover, I got a little bit spend happy bringing in 12 players over the summer, which included 𝘼𝙗𝙤𝙪 𝙈𝙚 from AC Milan, Eduardo Camavinga from Real Madrid, João Neves from PSG, and Maciej Popovic from Roma. The squad is deeper than ever and the talent level is a bit better dispersed throughout the whole team, which is just as well as we have 6 competitions on our calendar again this season. And with a team like this, I am expecting to win everything. It was a community shield as always for us to start the season as we took on last season's league runners-up Brighton. But this was a complete mismatch as we hammered them from start to finish, ultimately winning the game 4-0. We then followed that up with the evisceration of Europa League winners Roma in the UEFA Super Cup, winning the game 5-0 to make it 2 trophies from 2 at the start of the campaign. But alas, it wouldn't be the clean sweep that I was looking for. We suffered a narrow 1-0 defeat to Aston Villa at Villa Park in the quarter-finals of the Carabao Cup. It seems like the Carabao Cup is a trophy we are destined never to win in this save, it seems. In January, we offloaded a couple of players such as Gareth Branthwaite joining Barcelona for £11.25 million, and 𝘼𝙗𝙤𝙪 ended up in Saudi Arabia for £15.75. I did sign young Irish fullback Billy Carroll from Fulham, but sent him straight back on loan for the rest of the season. And whilst it seems like we can't win the Carabao Cup, it's not the same story in the FA Cup. We strolled our way through to the final without even conceding a goal this year, where we faced Newcastle. Despite the Magpies opening the scoring through Omega Dad's favourite man Frank Kessie, our overall star power was too much for them in the second half. Goals from Lamine Yamal and Jamal Musiala took us over the top to secure the trophy and a historic three-peat. Unlike last season, the Premier League was pretty hotly contested and we had to be at our best. However, we won our last 6 games of the season without even conceding a goal, which meant that we held off a late charge from Manchester City under their new manager Marco Rose. So it was back-to-back Premier League titles and a three-peat in the FA Cup, but could we match what the 2015 to 2018 Real Madrid team did in the Champions League and win that one 3 times in a row as well? The league phase was pretty straightforward with us going unbeaten, but we still finished second behind who else but Real Madrid. And to my surprise, the knockout stages didn't pose us with much of a real threat as we pushed Roma, PSG and then Arsenal aside with minimum effort. But then in the final, stood between us and history, was of course Real Madrid. Jude Bellingham settled the nerves early for us in Athens, scoring against his former club in the 14th minute. Madrid had a huge chance to equalise from the spot in the second half, but Mbappe saw his penalty well saved by Diogo Costa. Lamine Yamal then got in on the act in the 88th minute, all but writing our name on the trophy. Or so I thought. Now Madrid midfielder Bruno Fernandes scored for Real in the 92nd minute, but we were able to hold on and weather their storm to lift the Champions League trophy yet again. And this is the level of disparity that we're at now after winning 3 Champions Leagues in a row, as I've been given another £281 million to spend on players. Over the summer, we entered the Club World Cup for the first time and we even made it out of our group without even breaking a sweat. As we moved into the knockout phases, we faced teams closer to home as we sent Inter Milan home thanks to goals from Lamine Yamal and 𝘼𝙗𝙤𝙪. We followed that up with a penalty shootout win against Liverpool in the quarters before hammering Atletico in the semi-finals. It was PSG in the final and despite our domination, the two sides couldn't be separated in the 90 minutes, so it went to extra time where Maciej Popovic on as a sub scored twice in 3 minutes to see us lift trophy number 24 of this save. Whilst all of this was going on and we were playing matches left, right and centre, I still managed to transfer 20 players out of the club this window. Key outgoings included 𝘼𝙗𝙤𝙪 𝙈𝙚, who joined Al Nassr at the end of his contract, and he is now on £1 million a week, which is pretty nice if you can get it. Augustin Gay joined Real Sociedad for £39.5 million, and Youssoufa Moukoko joined Leicester for £27.5 million. On the incoming side of things, I splashed for a homegrown player to help the quota, as we signed Evan Ferguson from Brighton for £250 million. And then I activated the £75 million release clause to bring Alphonso Davies to the club. There were also 8 new gen wonder kids who signed for various fees, but they all returned to their clubs for the entire season on loan. This season will see the first team debut of Pontus Ekendal, who is ready to take the step up and fill that 𝘼𝙗𝙤𝙪 hole in our defence. This season, the Community Shield was a Manchester derby and was filled with controversy and late goals. 3 goals were scored after the 90th minute as Moises Caicedo cancelled out 𝘼𝙗𝙤𝙪's goal before Evan Ferguson won us the game in the 9th minute of injury time. Then, less than a week later, we played City again, this time for the UEFA Super Cup, but this time we were much more clinical in front of goal, with Endrick, Yamal and Ferguson all getting in on the action in front of goal. And I had to say at this point of the save, I've been doing some work with overseas affiliates. I've done videos on this in the past, but we are making so much money. And you can really see that when you look at our commercial revenue compared to everyone else in the Premier League, as we are making a quarter of the income of every single Premier League club combined. Make sure you get yourselves those overseas marketing affiliates, chaps. It really helps. Back on the pitch, the next trophy on my hit list was the Carabao Cup, and considering I hadn't won this one yet, I really wanted it. We had a difficult pathway through to our second final of the save, defeating Liverpool, Manchester City, and my team, Bristol City. And this time we were rewarded with a tie against Championship side Norwich. So how do you think this one went? Yep, you guessed it. We won this one comfortably with Evan Ferguson scoring a hat-trick in a 5-0 win to see me finally lift this trophy. And it only took a super team and an absolute boatload of cash. Thanks. In the Premier League, we were exceptionally consistent all season, and Manchester City regressed a little bit to see us making it 3 league wins in a row and league title number 24 for United. The most impressive thing for us this year was only the 19 goals that we conceded in the league, which was 20 goals better than the league's second best defence. So shout out Diogo Costa. Our domestic stranglehold of the FA Cup continued in Season 7 as we made it to the final after a little penalty shootout scare against Spurs in the semis. It was a Manchester derby for a 3rd time in 4 seasons, and it just seems like we have their number in this competition. Lamine Yamal got us up and running, and we never looked back, winning 4-2 to lift our 4th FA Cup trophy in a row. And after last season's three-peat in the Champions League, I had my vision primarily set on another goal in that competition, and it was another one of Real Madrid's. Now, they won the competition 5 times in a row in the 50s, and that is where I want to be. But to do that, we needed to win the competition again this season to make it number 4. Much like previous seasons, the league phase and knockout phases didn't really provide any shocks for a side as stacked as ours, even taking out Manchester City and Barcelona in the quarters and semis respectively. It was PSG in the final this time around, and wonder kid Warren Zaïre-Emery put us on the back foot with his goal in the first half. We dominated PSG in this game, but needed a 91st minute long ranger from Manuel Ugarte to pull us level. The game went into extra time, and it was again PSG who took the lead, this time through Gonçalo Ramos. But not to be upstaged, Endrick equalised for us just 6 minutes later, meaning the game went to penalties where PSG were woeful. Former United man 𝘼𝙗𝙤𝙪 𝙤𝙗 saw PSG's first penalty saved by Costa, and the Portuguese keeper was on hand again to save later in the shootout, this time from Joshua Kimmich, giving his international teammate João Neves the chance to win the trophy for us, and he did that emphatically, lashing the ball into the roof of the net. So that makes it 4 Champions Leagues in a row, and we are on the road to matching that almost 80-year-old record next season. And despite my reckless spending, I have another £250 million in my transfer budget for next season, and that's even after dropping £40 million on 2 new gens who are set to join us later this summer. This summer was a pretty slow window for us given how the rest of this save has actually gone. 6 players left Old Trafford, including Victor Christensen joining Real Sociedad on a free and Nicholas Sewell joining Luton Town for £28 million. We didn't make any first team signings this summer, but I did add another 6 new gens to add to our development squad. The best of which was Cyprien Blanchard, who arrived from Anderlecht for £25 million, and 𝘼𝙗𝙤𝙪, who signed from Millwall for £8.25 million. We are pretty stacked this season, and I'm expecting several issues with players' happiness. But it's actually got to the point where I can't spend all of our transfer budget, as I still have £260 million left there. Despite our 3 Premier League wins in a row, we're still not odds-on favourites to win the title, but our closest challengers are Arsenal, with title odds of 6-1. And then before the window closed, I dropped £121 million on players who wouldn't even play for us this season. The first was 𝘼𝙗𝙤𝙪, who signed from Marseille for £118 million. Next was goalkeeper Simon Dubok, who was signed from Santa Clara for £3.3 million. Both of them will return to their respective clubs for the season on loan because we're not quite ready for them just yet, but I see them having key areas to play in the next development phase of this particular United team. On the pitch, we managed to swat City aside in the Community Shield, with Evan Ferguson proving worth every penny of the £250 million we paid. The Super Cup was much more interesting as we shared an end-to-end barnstormer, but it was the Lamine Yamal show as the Spaniard scored a goal and provided 3 assists to see us win 5-4 in Zagreb. It will come as no surprise that our start to the year was remarkable, not actually losing a game in any competition until we faced Juventus in the Champions League in December. January saw 8 players leave the club on loan to get minutes elsewhere, as I was actually sending players to PSG, Barcelona and Bristol City all to get minutes. Crazy how I need to support teams like this. We did make some money in January though, as Facundo Soria was sold to Arsenal for £46 million. Considering he only played 16 times for us in the Premier League over 4 seasons, I was happy to make £37 million worth of profit on him. As we moved into February, we had the Carabao Cup final where we faced Newcastle. And again, it was the Lamine Yamal show in another final, as he balled out with 2 goals and an assist in a 5-2 win. Newcastle did take us to extra time though, but our subs of Caicedo, Endrick and João Neves were all too much for them to handle. In the back half of the season, we had some devastating news. We wouldn't win the FA Cup for a 5th time in a row, as we were surprisingly knocked out at the quarter-final stage by Fulham. We didn't really turn up in this one and deserved to be knocked out. However, despite 4 losses in the second half of the season in the Premier League, we did secure title number 25, with both Everton and Wolves making it into Europe for next year. But I really wanted that 5th Champions League title in a row, and we really weren't at our best in that competition this season. We limped past Everton in the round of 16 before doing the same past Inter Milan in the quarters. It was Madrid up next in the semis, and that rotten luck on the road continued as we lost 2-1 in the Bernabeu, but made up for it by winning 4-1 at Old Trafford. So the stage was set to equal Real Madrid's record, and of course it was Manchester City who were there to spoil our party. This time it was Evan Ferguson who had a huge game for us, opening the scoring before seeing Erling Haaland cancel that goal out. City then took the lead in the second half through Victor Gyokeres before our big Swede Pontus Ekendal made it 2-2 with a wonder strike in the second phase of a corner. Then up steps our Irish hero as Evan Ferguson raced through on goal before firing beyond the City keeper to score the decisive goal in the game. So we lifted number 5 in a row to equal Madrid's record from the 50s. Next year, we go to make it 6 on the spin. It's now the year 2031 and I have £238 million in my transfer budget and a £9 million a week wage budget. Over the summer, Arsenal came calling again for more of our players. First, Eduardo Camavinga signed for the Gunners for £79 million, and he was joined by the loan signing of Moises Caicedo. And I'm sure you're wondering why we let a player like that go out on loan. Well, it's because Arsenal agreed to a future fee of £106 million for him if he completed 20 matches for them. So he had to go, blood.
He has to go, blood. He has to go, blood.
We also sold Semi to Spurs for £40 million and Alphonso Davies to 𝘼𝙗𝙤𝙪 for £38.5 million. I didn't want to sell Davies, but I couldn't compete with the £1.1 million a week salary he was offered. On the incoming side of things, we made one big boy addition as Fabian 𝘼𝙗𝙤𝙪 arrived from Wolfsburg for 66 million to join 𝘼𝙗𝙤𝙪 at the heart of our defence. I will also be promoting new gen 𝘼𝙗𝙤𝙪 to be our first choice left back to push his development to the next level. And I will also be making the tough decision to move on from Diogo Costa in goal. He's attracting offers from Real Madrid and Chelsea, and I want to promote last summer's signing 𝘼𝙗𝙤𝙪 𝙤𝙗 to be our new number 1 once his loan expires at his starting club Santa Clara. So we are exclusively going to be new gens at the back, but still full of talent in that final third. But this is the crazy situation that we're in, as I still have £350 million in our transfer budget that I just don't need to spend. As always, we kicked off the season with our annual Manchester derby at Wembley in the Community Shield, and much like the last 2 seasons, we came out on top. But this time it was via penalty shootout after a very dull game, but Diogo Costa came up clutch in his last one for the club. I said he was attracting interest, so was sold to Real Madrid for a whopping £85 million. But he wasn't the only player who left the club for La Liga, as Matej Popovic was shipped off to Barcelona for £93 million. That meant I had a massive amount of cash burning a hole in my pocket, so I went to PSG and dropped £300 million to bring Warren Zaïre-Emery to the club. Honestly, this game has gone nuts now. I then signed the next Bukayo Saka from Arsenal, as I paid the minimum fee release clause of £37.5 million for Shaquille Manning. And all whilst this was happening, we managed to brush PSV aside in the UEFA Super Cup, with Endrick, Bellingham and Ferguson doing the damage. Looking at our schedule, I think this is up there with one of the most impressive teams I've ever assembled in Football Manager, as we made it all the way through to January, where we lost our first game of the season. January did see me move a good servant to the club, as Michael Kayode was sold to Real Madrid after not playing for us once in the Premier League. And I guess that's what happens to you when you have a new gen like Martin Serrano in your team. £10 million well spent, if you ask me. And I'm telling you guys, if you are watching this video and wondering how I find all these Wonder Kids, head on over to my Patreon. I've got a Wonder Kid finder filter over there. That's what I use to find all these guys. It is an absolute monster of a filter. You find these guys, they're so cheap, and they turn into players just like this. You know, I mentioned that first loss of the season. Well, that was part of our Carabao Cup defeat over 2 legs against Manchester City in the semi-finals. But we did get our own back on City in the FA Cup final, as Endrick cancelled out Erling Haaland's early goal before Zaïre-Emery and Fabian 𝘼𝙗𝙤𝙪 scored for us in extra time to reclaim the FA Cup from the blue half of Manchester. And in the Premier League, this was our best performance to date. We didn't lose a single game all season to make it 5 in a row, but we also matched the 2004 Arsenal side and get ourselves a nice little golden trophy by going unbeaten. But I do have to say, considering we were undefeated, City only being a single point behind us is a little bit of a worry for us next year. So we'd achieved a little bit of domestic glory in the Premier League, achieving what Arsenal did back in 2004 and getting ourselves that little golden trophy. Could we now set a record of our own in the Champions League by winning that 6 times, yes, 6 times in a row? Our league phase was pretty straightforward, only dropping points away to Arsenal. The knockout stages were pretty straightforward, dispatching the best team from Germany, Spain and Italy respectively on our way to another Champions League final. But it was an unlikely opponent in that Champions League final, as we went head to head with Everton. The game was tight and ultimately settled by a set piece, as Fabian 𝘼𝙗𝙪 leapt highest at the near post to see us win the trophy and make history. This was one hell of a season, and we have another 200 million to take into the summer. Our final summer of this video saw us say goodbye to one of our first signings, as Endrick left the club, joining PSG for £115 million. This summer also saw the loan of Moises Caicedo turn permanent, so that was for another £106 million. I also shifted an unhappy 𝘼𝙗𝙤𝙪 𝙤𝙗 to Real Madrid for £250 million, just casually topping up my transfer budget by a cool £270 million. First on my hit list was German wonderkid 𝘼𝙗𝙤𝙪 𝙤𝙗 from Bayern for £105 million, and I want to transition him into being our new defensive midfielder. We filled that Endrick-shaped hole with 2 players. First was 𝘼𝙗𝙤𝙪 from PSG for 225 million and Bernardo Valenta from Southampton for an initial 75 million. So this is how we're lining up going into our 10th and final season, and I wanted to showcase some of the talent that is broken into this team. Simon Dubok is now up there with one of the best goalkeepers in the world, and he is just aged 24. Martin Serrano is the best right back in the world right now and would walk into any side in the world. Our set-piece threat is Fabian Weissner at the back, and he continues to dominate for us and Germany since arriving from Wolfsburg. One of our first new-gen signings was Pontus Eckendal, who is a physical specimen and another elite centre-back. Rounding off the defence is 𝘼𝙗𝙤𝙪, who is currently wanted by Real Madrid, but he won't be going anywhere. And naturally, players like 𝘼𝙗𝙤𝙪, Jude Bellingham, and Evan Ferguson are all elite real-world talents. And this is our last hurrah with this video, this squad, this team, so let's make it a good one. Our team of superstars were ruthless this season, defeating Manchester City in the Community Shield and then Wolves in the Super Cup before we even got out of first gear. Our year had a great start, but we did suffer a worrying 5-2 defeat at the Etihad in September. Then in January, it was time for a massive change at the club as 11 players left us during that window, including 6 on permanent transfers. The biggest of these was 𝘼𝙗𝙤𝙪, who had his head turned by PSG, who paid an initial £186 million for his services. Then Real Madrid came calling for 2 players as they first signed Mexican new-gen Spencer Castellanos for £105 million, and then later in the window Jamal Musiala for another £84 million. And finally, the last of all the big boy transfers, Evan Ferguson wanted to leave the club at the end of his current deal, so was sold to Barcelona for £60 million before that could happen. So that meant in January I saw an increase in the club's transfer budget of £425 million, but to fill some of the gaps I didn't need to spend all of it. We did sign Martial Traoré from Monaco for £50 million and Davide Machi from Barcelona for £175 million. The main reason behind the sales was the emergence of new-gen talent in our squad, such as Luka Mace and Bernardo Valenta, who are ready to step into first-team roles. After we moved into 2033, we were pretty consistent, beating Manchester City in the league, but losing to them in the Carabao Cup final 3-1, with us even failing to register a shot on target. And despite winning our final 15 games of the Premier League season in a row, we weren't crowned champions for the first time in 6 years. City topped the table with 100 points, with us 5 points behind them. Shout out to Marco Rose for this achievement and Erling Haaland for his 41 goals in the Premier League alone. We did, however, make it back to the FA Cup final, where this time we faced Liverpool, but this was a bit of a no contest as we took over the game in the second half, winning 4-1. But only having the FA Cup, the Super Cup and the Community Shield with a team of this caliber with the money that I've spent on it is a little bit disappointing, so could we have a little bit of a silver lining with our favourite competition, the Champions League? We were unbeaten in the lead phase and then faced one of the most difficult knockout phases possible. We first defeated Real Madrid before coming from a goal down on the tie to beat Liverpool. We then edged past Barcelona by a single goal on aggregate, with our form at Old Trafford dragging us through. So the stage was set, the Champions League final, and of course we had to face Manchester City. It was the game that opened this particular save, so I find it pretty poetic that it is the one that closes it 10 years later. Neither side really impacted the game even deep into extra time, where Carlos Diogo scored a remarkable header for us that was enough to see us lift the Champions League trophy yet again. In this video, we've won 7 Champions Leagues, 6 Premier League titles, 6 FA Cups, 2 Carabao Cups, 7 Super Cups, 7 Community Shields, and 1 Club World Cup. So a total of 36 trophies in 10 years. My managerial record is looking pretty tasty as well, with a 73% win ratio after 637 games. But now this has got me curious. I have played 10 seasons with this team and I am loving it and I don't want to let it go. So I want to find out right now what happens if I take this team and manage them for 100 years. So that's what we are working on right now, and if you do want to see that, make sure you drop a like on it. I'm going to set you a like target of 1,000 likes on this video to get that video out ASAP. Hit that like button. Let's see if you can do it.